Hello everybody, it's really great to be back for the second Belfast International Ballet Festival, and it's wonderful to be here to share a lot of historical knowledge with you all. Just before we begin, I would just actually like to say a couple of words. I would first of all like to give a big shout out to the girls of High Points Youth Ballet who are sadly leaving us after the festival. So Amelia, Christina, Lucy, Ella, Annabelle, sorry if I've missed anyone. I just want to say, girls, it has been an absolute joy to have gotten to see you dance, and an absolute joy to have gotten to give you some history presentations on several occasions. So I want to say I wish you all the very best of luck for your next chapter. So toi 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 to you all, girls, for the future. And then second of all, I just want to say that, of course, outside of the theatre, we are living in a very, very dark world of dark times where there's so much suffering going on. And just on a personal note, I would like to dedicate this presentation to the people of Ukraine, especially my friends, Oleksiy Knyazkov and Elizaveta Huhidze, who of course are here as part of the festival. And I just want to say that the people of Ukraine are some of the ones I know. They are some of the most incredible people, very inspiring, stronger than I could ever imagine and I could ever be. And I'm so happy and so proud that Losha and Lisa are back in Belfast, and I'm so happy I can make this connection. So this is for you too, as much as it is for me and for everyone else, and I'm really, really happy to have you here. So, Slavo Quaini. Thank you. Okay, so as Jake was explaining, I am here today to give a presentation, and apologies in advance if we go over time, Jake. But the presentation this year will be the Fairy Doll and La Bayadère. So beginning with the Fairy Doll. The Fairy Doll is a one-act ballet in two scenes, but it's one of the most rarely performed ballets today because it's deemed a student's ballet. It's traditionally performed by the Vaganova Academy in St. Petersburg and several schools in the West, but it's absent from the main stage, even though it wasn't even created as a student's ballet. And I hope this works. Yeah. Okay. And this is a drawing of the decor of the very first Fairy Doll production. The ballet was created in Vienna, Austria, in 1887 by the ballet master Josef Hausreiter. Don't think I'm saying that right. The composer Josef Bayer, and the costume designer Franz Xavier Gall, who co-wrote the libretto with Hausreiter. And the ballet is set in a toy shop in Vienna where mechanical dolls are made and sold, the most magnificent of which is a fairy doll. But at midnight, when the toy shop is closed and empty, the dolls magically come to life, and through the night, at the end, dance through the night, and at the very end, the fairy doll is crowned their queen. But when morning comes, all returns to normal. The Fairy Doll made its world premiere on the 4th of October 1888 at the Vienna Court Theatre, now the Vienna State Opera House, and it was very successful. The ballet was subsequently toured across Europe, and it was first staged in Russia by Jose Mendes on the 20th of February 1897 at the Imperial Bolshoi Theatre in Moscow. In 1903, it was staged in St. Petersburg for the Imperial Ballet, and it's from this production that the version known today derives. The 1903 production was staged by the brothers Nikolai and Sergei Lagat, pictured here. That's Nikolai on the left and Sergei on the right. The Lagat brothers were two of the greatest male dancers of their time. They were two of Marius Petipa's star dancers. For their production, the story stayed the same, but the setting was changed from Vienna to 1830s St. Petersburg, and the decor and costumes were designed by Leon Bakst, who is most famous for his collaboration with Sergei Diaghilev and the Ballet Russe, for whose repertoire he designed most of the decor and costumes. And here are some of Bach's designs for costume designs for the fairy doll. So we've got the bunny drummer, the Japanese doll, and the fairy doll. Also for the 1903 production, several new music numbers were added to Bayer's score for new characters, some of which had already been added in Moscow, and most of these additions are still used today. Those new numbers included the March of the Toy Soldiers. This is set to music by Tchaikovsky. It's the fourth movement from his Suite No. 1 in D major, known as the Miniature March. The variation of the Baby Doll is set to music by the Russian composer Anatoly Lyadov, who composed many works for piano and briefly worked with the Ballet Russe. And the variation of the Russian dolls. The Russian dolls were introduced in the Moscow production. And in the 1903 production, their dance number was set to music by Anton Rubinstein, but the music that's used today is not Rubinstein's. It's by the Italian composer Cesare Pugni, and it's from his and Petipa's grand ballet, The Pharaoh's Daughter, which premiered in 1862. The music is for the variation of the River Neva, which is from a grand pas in an underwater kingdom scene in Act 2 that features 6 soloists who represent different rivers from around the world. And then finally, for the 1903 production, 2 new music numbers were composed and added by the Italian composer Riccardo Drigo, the variation of the French doll and the pas de trois. And then this is a photo from around 1910. This is Olga Preobrazhenskaya, Nikolai Legat, and Mikhail Obukov in the pas de trois. So the pas de trois is the ballet's most famous piece, and it's the only one that sometimes appears on the main stage. And there's an interesting theory about its creation. Firstly, it was created to follow the custom of creating a new pas for the leading ballerina in a new production of an existing ballet. But the theory goes that its concept is about the personal life of the first ballerina who danced it. And here she is. This is Matilda Shushinskaya, prima ballerina, imperial mistress, and supreme diva absolute. Yes. Shushinskaya was one of the great ballerinas of her time, but she was also quite a character. She was ambitious and intelligent, but she was also ruthless, manipulative, and very selfish. And she's arguably more famous for her scandalous love life than her career. And here's what happened. In 1890, when she was 17, she met the then Tsarevich Nikolai Romanov, the future Tsar Nicholas II, when he and his family attended her graduation performance, and a year later, she became his mistress. Shushinskaya, as she said, was madly in love. But for Nicholas, it seems his love was more platonic than romantic. They broke up in 1894 when he was finally able to propose to the real love of his life, Princess Alix of Hesse, the future Tsarina Alexandra, and he assigned his cousin, the Grand Duke Sergei Mikhailovich, to be Shushinskaya's protector. And Shushinskaya would, even though she was a great artist and she certainly earned much of what she got, she would use her connections to the imperial court to advance her career. So everyone in the theatre had to put up with her diva behavior and her countless shenanigans. And then in 1900, she met and fell in love with the Tsar's other cousin, the Grand Duke Andrei Vladimirovich, whom she eventually married in 1921. That's Andrei on the left, and that's Sergei on the right. But when she and Andrei got together, she didn't break up with Sergei. So the two cousins would share the same woman for over a decade. And things only got more complicated in 1902 when Shushinskaya gave birth to her son Vladimir, known as Vova for short, because both Grand Dukes were convinced that they were Vova's father. But Shushinskaya was adamant that Andrei was the father. So what's all this got to do with the fairy doll pas de trois, you may be asking? Well, the concept of the pas de trois is the fairy doll being courted by the two Pierrots who are vying for her hand, just like Shushinskaya was being courted by Andrei and Sergei at the same time. So According to the theory, the Fairy Doll Pas de Trois is a play on Shushenskaya's Ménage à Trois with the two Grand Dukes. Now, there's no evidence proving that the theory is true, I admit that. It could just be some anti-Shushenskaya rhetoric, but to be honest, I do think it is plausible. They all had a sense of humour back then, and it certainly gives a whole new meaning to the Pas de Trois, doesn't it? So, something new for Angela, Stephen, and Oscar to think about. Yeah. Okay. And then here we have three original cast members from the 1903 production. So we've got, on the left, Agripina Vaganova as the Chinese doll, Anna Pavlova as the Spanish doll, and then I think that's Olga Chumakova as the French doll. So the Legat brothers' production of the Fairy Doll premiered at the Imperial Hermitage Theatre on the 7th of February 1903 with Shushenskaya as the Fairy Doll and Sergei Legat and Mikhail Fokine as the two Pierrots. Fokine was stepping in for an injured Nikolai Legat. The ballet remained in the repertoire until 1925, and it was around this time that it was first staged for the students in Moscow and Leningrad, as St. Petersburg was now called. And then in 1989, Soviet ballet master Konstantin Sergeyev staged the ballet for the Vaganova Academy, and it's his version, which is based on the Legat brothers' version that stands today. But before the first students' production, the ballet was being taken around the world by Anna Pavlova, pictured here. Pavlova debuted as the Fairy Doll in 1904, and it was clearly one of her favourite roles. She later added the ballet to her company's repertoire, and she performed it all over the world. And several figures from the British Ballet saw her dance the Fairy Doll, including Sir Frederick Ashton, who saw her dance it when he was a teenager in 1917. So to close the section of the Fairy Doll, I'm going to try and play a short video clip. I hope this works. If it does, it's a short video clip from the 1920s of Pavlova as the Fairy Doll. So I hope this works. Okay. And now we're moving into more dramatic and somewhat darker territory. We're now heading into La Bayadère. So, La Bayadère is a ballet in 4 acts and 7 scenes, but today it's normally danced or staged in 3 acts, and it was created by Marius Petipa, pictured on the left, the composer Ludwig Minkus, pictured on the right, and the critic Sergei Kudikov, who co-wrote the libretto with Petipa, and it was the most popular of Petipa's exotic ballets. Minkus, a little bit about Minkus. Minkus was born and raised in Vienna. He worked in Russia for, I think, over 20 years, and he was Petipa's longest collaborator. He composed a total of 18 ballets, but only 2 survived into the 20th century, La Bayadère and Don Quixote, and he was also the composer of the Paquita Grand Pas Classique, created by him and Petipa in 1881. La Bayadère was created between 1876 and 1877 for the benefit of the prima ballerina Ekaterina Vazem, pictured on the left, who was the original Nikia, and the original soloist was Lev Ivanov, pictured on the right, who is most famous for being the original choreographer of the Nutcracker and the lakeside scenes from Swan Lake. The ballet is set in ancient India, and it tells a story of love, betrayal, murder, and divine vengeance. The beautiful temple dancer Nikia and the warrior Solor are in love and pledge eternal love to one another, but the Raja has decided that Solor will marry his daughter Gamzati. The Grand Brahmin, whose love Nikia rejected, tells the Raja about her relationship with Solor, hoping he'll have Solor killed. But his plan horribly backfires when the Raja decides that Nikia must die. Overhearing this, Gamzatti tries to bribe Nakia into giving up Solor, but Nakia refuses, and in the heat of the moment threatens Gamzatti with a dagger, but is stopped by a handmaid, so Gamzatti conspires with her father to murder Nakia. And later at a Hindu festival, Nakia is brought to dance, and she's given a basket of flowers, which she's told is from Solor, but it's really from the Raja and Gamzatti, who have hidden a venomous snake in the basket, and the snake fatally bites Nakia when she holds the basket close. Later, the grief-stricken Solor dreams of Nakia in a heavenly realm called the Kingdom of the Shades, where she forgives him, and her shade continues to haunt him at his wedding to Gamzatti, but only he can see her. And when the Grand Brahmin joins Gamzatti in Solor's hands, the angry gods destroy the palace, killing all responsible for Nakia's murder, and the shades of Nakia and Solor are reunited in the afterlife. La Bayadère made its world premiere on the 4th of February, Old Style 23rd of January 1877 at the Imperial Bolshoi Theatre in St. Petersburg. Petipa's choreography and Minkus's music were praised, as was Vazam's performance, and the ballet was kept in the repertoire until 1885. 15 years later, in 1900, La Bayadère was revived for the benefit of the premier danseur noble, Pavel Gert, pictured here. For 40 years of service to the imperial theatres, Gert performed Solor, Matilda Shushinskaya danced Nakia, and Olga Preobrazhenskaya danced Gamzatti. Gert did not dance. Instead, he did all the acting and most of the partnering, primarily because he was 56 years old at the time. And if you think that's crazy, he held on to the role afterwards, and he gave his last performance as Solor on the 1st of May, Old Style 19th of April 1907, when he was 62. Yes, Jake. So the revival premiered on the 15th of December, Old Style 3rd of December 1900 at the Imperial Mariinsky Theatre, and subsequently La Bayadère was once again a prominent member of the repertoire, and this time it was here to stay. La Bayadère was notated by Nikolai Sergeyev and his assistants, and this is one of the pages of the notation scores for La Bayadère. This is the entrance of the shades. If you look up at the top corner, you can see that the 48 number. But all modern productions derive from the 1941 Kirov ballet production that was staged by Vladimir Ponomarev and Vakhtang Shabukiani, which is credited as, quote, after Petipa. The most famous modern productions include Natalia Makarova's production and Rudolf Nureyev's production. But in the 21st century, we saw two historically better informed productions where the aim was to restore the ballet to as close as we can get to Petipa. And first was in 2002 when Sergei Vikarev staged a new production for the Mariinsky Ballet, in which he aimed to restore Petipa's original ballet, but not pretending it to be an academic reconstruction for various reasons. And then in 2018, Alexei Ratmansky staged a new production for the Staats Ballet Berlin with the same aim, to restore Petipa. And for both productions, they used the notation scores by Nikolai Sergeyev to reconstruct Petipa's choreography, but it was Ratmansky who was more faithful to the scores. Unfortunately, Vikarev retained most of the Soviet choreography. So we're going to have a look at some of the experts that are part of the festival and look at the history behind them and how they've changed since Petipa, starting with Nakia's La Monde, which is being performed by the very talented Holly Brown, and the Kingdom of the Shades from Act 3, Scene 2, which is being danced by the very talented ladies of High Points Youth Ballet. And here we have Anna Pavlova as Nakia. This is in Nakia's death scene. So Nakia's La Monde is where she expresses her sadness about Solor's engagement at a Hindu festival of Badrinath. And a big difference between today's version and Petipa's version is that originally Nakia dances with a prop veena, which is a type of Indian guitar. And the significance of this is that it's connected to Act 1, Scene 1. One of the numbers from Act 1 is the solo flute number, which is danced today by Nakia with a water pitcher. But originally, this is no dance at all. It's a romantic scene where Nikia appears at a window in the temple and she plays a melody on her vina while Solor listens and watches on from outside. That's what the solo flute melody is representing, and it was in the Soviet productions. I think it was Ponomarev who changed it to the dance where Nikia uses fetching water as a pretext to look for Solor. And I should also say that Solor and Nikia's meeting today is a romantic pas de deux. It wasn't a pas de deux under Petipa, it was a mime scene. The pas de deux, that was added by Konstantin Sergeyev in 1947. So when Nikia is brought to dance, she's playing on her vina a variation of the melody she played in the previous act, which makes Solor even more remorseful. And another variation of this melody appears in Act 3, accompanying her shade. So it connects three of the acts. And eventually the vina was removed, and unfortunately the variation is not notated. So when Vikarev and Ratmansky staged their respective productions, they retained the Soviet choreography, but they restored the vina. So I'm going to see if I can show you a video clip from Ratmansky's production. This is Polina Semyonova, is Nikia. Yeah. And then we come to, of course, the Kingdom of the Shades, and this is a cast photo from the 1900 revivals. We've got the huge corps de ballet, and then we've got Shashinskaya and Gert in the middle, and the three solo shades kneeling. So the Kingdom of the Shades is one of the most famous scenes in all of ballet, and one of Petipa's most celebrated compositions. In most modern productions, this is the ballet's final act, because it became so in the Soviet Union, but that's not how it's meant to be. And so I'm going to take you through a couple of the changes made to the act. In Petipa's version, the third act begins with an important scene that is omitted today. Solor is in his room grieving for Nikia, and he gets an unwanted visit from Gamzati, who tries to win him over. But then the weeping shade of Nikia appears, but only he can see her. And this is an element from romanticism that we see in the romantic ballets like La Sylphide and Giselle, when the lead female haunts the lead male in an elusive form. So it's like when the sylph appears to James in the farmhouse and tempts him away from his fiancée, and when Giselle's ghost appears to Albrecht at her grave. Here, Nikia's shade is reminding Solor of his vows, but it's also a warning that danger is coming. And when Solor is left alone, he smokes opium, falls asleep, leading into the next scene, the Kingdom of the Shades. In the original 1877 production, the scene took place in an enchanted castle on the sky on a fully lighted stage, and the original number of shades was 64. It was in the 1900 revival that Petipa changed the setting to the peaks of the Himalayas, and the number of shades was reduced to 48, no less. And today the number of shades varies, but the most common number is now 32. And the most famous number, of course, is the entrance of the shades, which was inspired by Gustave Doré's illustrations Paradiso for Dante's The Divine Comedy. Now, in terms of changes to the scene, the music numbers were mostly kept intact, but the choreography was changed. For example, the choreography for Nikia that is traditionally danced today, that's not by Petipa, it's by Agrippina Vaganova and Natalia Dudinskaya, and the choreography for Solor is by Vakhtang Shabukiani. And another important point is that the narrative is still ongoing. The narrative is that Solor meets Nikia in this heavenly realm, she forgives him, and they are reconciled until Solor awakes. So we're going to have a look at two of the variations. There are 4 variations in the scene. The first 3 are those of the 3 solo shades, and the notation scores reveal that 2 of the variations are very close to what is danced today. The first variation is perhaps changed by at least 50%, and the second variation is virtually unchanged. But the third variation is almost completely different, because not only is the choreography different, it was originally performed at a faster tempo. I'm going to have a look, actually. I'm going to see if I can show you this. This is a reconstruction, yeah. This is a reconstruction by Stepanov notation expert Doug Fillington of the original, of the third variation. See? Yeah. And then the fourth variation is the so-called scarf duet, which is today performed by Nikia and Solor with a long tulle veil. But under Petipa, this is not a duet, it's a solo for Nikia. What happens is that Nikia enters holding one end of the veil, and the other end is attached to a wire from above the stage. She dances with the veil, and then she lets it go, and it flies away and disappears into the fly space. Ekaterina Vazem, the original Nikia, mentions this in her memoirs. She wrote, "I had great success in the variation accompanied by Leopold Orr's violin solo with the veil, which flies upwards at the end." Petipa's choreography is not notated, but there are written descriptions by Soviet choreographer and dance writer Fyodor Lopakov, who wrote that the variation contained demi-tours on attitude, not the full attitude turns that we know today. It might have been Natalia Dudinskaya who first opted to do the full attitude turns, yes. So we're going to have a quick look at a little excerpt from Ratmansky's stage, and again you'll see Polina Semyonova as Nikia. Here we go. This works. Oh. Wish I could show you the whole thing, but never mind. Okay. And then, of course, we have the Grand Coda and the finale. One significant difference is Nikia and Solor's entrance. Today, Solor partners Nikia in a traveling sequence across the stage, but according to the notation scores, Nikia travels the stage unpartnered, with Solor pursuing her and only being able to grasp her for a moment before she repeats her sequence. Again, this is another element from the Romantic ballet where the hero is pursuing the elusive woman of his desires, but he can't grasp her. And then this section, of course, is followed by Nikia's solo, Solor's solo, and the final section of the coda, which today includes the famous fast soutenu turns performed by Nikia. Those are not by Petipa, they're by Vaganova. They were probably added, she probably added them in the 1930s. The notation scores reveal a very different, more musically rhythmic, speedy Balanchine-like sequence for Nikia. And as I said before, in most productions, this is when the ballet ends. Nakia and Solor come together with the corps de ballet and the curtain falls on them, performing a supportive pose on attitude. But this is not the real ending because the ballet is missing an entire act, Act 4. The Soviet productions cut the fourth act and it became the Soviet tradition to end La Bayadère with the Kingdom of the Shades. And this is one of the most problematic changes ever made to any of Petipa's ballets because the ballet and its narrative are left unfinished and it raises many unanswered questions. And so when the Kingdom of the Shades became the ballet's finale, the final scene from Act 3 was cut, which is a very short finale. In the third scene, Solor wakes up from his dream and is greeted by the warriors who tell him that today is the day of his wedding to Gamzati. In despair, he follows them as the curtain falls. The music for this scene was edited and added onto the music for the coda of the Kingdom of the Shades, so that the ballet could come to a close that was acceptable to the zeitgeist. And this is a sketch drawing of the finale of the fourth act, the destruction of the palace. So the long absent fourth act is entitled The Wrath of the Gods, and it takes place at the Raja's palace where Gamzati and Solor's wedding is underway. But more drama unfolds when Nakia's shade reappears and continues to haunt Solor. So why was the fourth act removed? The honest answer, and this is the honest answer, nobody knows. Nobody knows why the fourth act was taken out. For years, historians and scholars have tried to solve this mystery, but it's always led to more questions and no answers. The overriding reason is because there was never a concrete explanation or an official reason given for why it was cut, and it's led to multiple theories, which could all be true or could at least have contributed to the reason. So the last performance of the fourth act was at the former Imperial Mariinsky Theatre in 1924, and some modern productions have presented new versions of the final act, most notably Natalia Makarova's production. But it was not until Vikarev's production that Petipa's fourth act was restored to the stage with the proper music, which was cut from the ballet. But it was Ratmansky's production that presented, most of which was cut, beg your pardon. But it was Ratmansky's production that presented the most authentic version of Petipa's final act, 94 years after it was last performed. The fourth act is the shortest act in the ballet, and it has two dance numbers. The first number is the forgotten and/or unknown Dance of the Lotus Blossoms, which is a dance for 24 female students. With prop flower garlands. It's also here that the shade of Nakia first appears. There's a moment where the girls make a circle in the middle of the stage and they tap the floor with their garlands, and Nakia would rise up onto the stage via a trap door. And then the second dance is the Grand Pas d'Action, and this is the Grand Pas d'Action that is today performed in Act 2. By Gamzati, Solor, the 4 Bayadères, and 2 male dancers. That's not from Act 2, it's from Act 4. It's been in the incorrect place for so many years. It was transferred to Act 2 in the 1920s when the fourth act started to disappear. By 1941, the choreography had been heavily revised, the original concept and narrative had disappeared, and it was changed from a pas d'action into a standard classical pas. New variations were introduced for Gamzati and Solor, and the original coda was cut. And Gamzati was weaved into the coda for the Grand Divertissement, where she traditionally performs a standardized sequence of various types of fouettes. But I think these fouettes were added after 1941. I think maybe in the 1950s they first appeared. Yeah. In its original form, the Grand Pas d'Action is performed by the shade of Nakia, Solor, Gamzati, 4 choreographies, and a cavalier who did the dancing for Pavel Gert in 1900. The original concept is that Solor is dancing with Gamzati at the wedding, but the shade of Nakia continues to haunt him and intercedes in the dancing, but she's only visible to him, so everybody else thinks he's going mad, he's losing the plot. Okay, so, well, we're now at the end of the presentation, and well, what better way to end than with the real ending of La Bayadère? The finale is filled with drama from the start. Gamzati is presented with a basket of flowers, which happens to be identical to the one that was given to Nikia. Horrified, she rejects the basket because it reminds her of her crime, and she pleads with her father to complete the wedding ceremony. The Grand Brahmin joins Gamzati and Solor's hands in marriage, but before he can finish, the skies darken, thunder rolls, lightning strikes, and the palace is destroyed by a great earthquake sent by the angry gods to avenge Nikia's murder, and everyone is killed. The ballet then concludes with an apotheosis in which the shades of Nikia and Solor are reunited. And according to the artist Alexander Benoit, the 1900 apotheosis used the effect of golden rain, and another eyewitness wrote, "The shade of Nikia hovers in the air, drawing the shade of her beloved Solor to the mountain heights where a ravishing pagoda is visible in the golden rain." Unfortunately, neither Vikarev or Ratmansky restored this, but try and imagine that wonderful image, if you can, of Nikia and Solor flying away together through the golden rain to the pagoda in the Himalayas. I hope one day we'll see this restored. Yeah. So, as I wrap up, I just want to say again, huge thank you to Jake and Anna and Rana for arranging this incredible festival, and thank you again for inviting me to be a part of it. And yes, and thank you to all my wonderful audience and friends, and a big toi to everyone for today's performance. So we'll finish off in the most appropriate way, if the video works, with the finale and apotheosis of Petipa's La Bayadère as staged by Ratmansky. So thank you, everyone.